everyone, welcome to ArtIAS. I am Amit kumar. Friends, in this lecture, we will discuss very basic concept of polity, that is constitutionalism and constitution. Right? What happens that especially the beginners, right, or freshers, aspirant, they think that both are same, right? But no, right? First, you should know about constitutionalism, then you should know about constitution, right? Why? Because constitutionalism comes first, then constitution comes, right? We will see all these things in this lecture. Okay, so just see what are or what we are going to discuss, right? First we will discuss constitutionalism, right? What is constitutionalism? Then we will see what does it apply, means what does constitutionalism apply, right? Then we will move towards what does constitutionalism incorporates, means its elements, right? Elements of constitutionalism. Then we will see does it exist in India or not, right? Because we have constitution, right? But we will see does constitutionalism exist in India or not, right? And then we will see its importance, means importance of constitutionalism, and lastly constitutionalism and constitution, right, will be compared, right? So let's start, right? So first just see what is constitutionalism, right? Simply before directly jumping into the main definition, okay, I would like to tell you that constitution, right, and constitutionalism, right, what is the basic difference? You can call it soul or spirit, right? If constitutionalism is soul or spirit, then constitution is what? Body. We can call it body, right? So this is the basic difference. So first comes constitutionalism, then constitution comes, right? You can say in simple terms that it provides base or foundation to any constitution, right? There are certain values, principles, right, that constitutionalism establishes, and all these elements, or you can say principles, helps in framing a constitution, right? A good constitution always includes the elements of constitutionalism, right? For example, rule of law. A good constitution, a democratic constitution, always include rule of law, fundamental rights. All these are nothing but elements of constitutionalism, right? Limited government, right? All these are also nothing but elements of constitutionalism, and all these are included in a good democratic constitution, right? Take the example of India or US or Britain, whatever, right? So now see what is constitutionalism. It says it is an ideology, right, that states that government authority is derived from people, right? For example, the preamble of India, it says we the people of India. So what is the meaning of this phrase, we the people? It simply means the constitution derives its power, right, from the people. People have the final authority, right? So even when government is there, right, government derives its authority, you can say, or power, okay, from constitution. But where does the constitution get its power, right, or authority? It is from the people. So constitutionalism, right, is an ideology. I told you it is soul or spirit, right? Again, it is an ideology, right, that states that government authority is derived from the people, right, and should be limited by a constitution, should be limited by a constitution. That's why I told you that constitution is body. Body means it is present in physical form, right? But constitutionalism is abstract form, it cannot be seen, right? So constitution is specifying what that the government can and cannot do, right? So what does a government can or cannot do, it is defined by the constitution. And how a constitution is framed, it is framed on the basis or elements of constitutionalism, right? So this is the basic definition, you can say, right? So now again you can say it is idea, right, which states that the state is constrained by laws that limit its authority rather than being free to do anything it wants, right? So next, what does constitutionalism imply, right? How you will found that is it or constitutionalism exist or not, right? So it implies simply, constitutionalism implies, I don't know how you will find that constitutionalism exists in any country or not. What are the elements, what are the, you can say, signs, right? So it it implies that exercise of political power shall be bound by limitations, checks, controls and rules, right? So bound by limitation. For example, constitution is nothing but it provides limitation to all the three organs of state: legislature, executive, judiciary. Their roles have been clearly defined, right? So these are nothing but limitations. Also, where for example, where there is concept of separation of power, there is a method called checks and balance, right? Checks and balance, right? Controls, rules, right? Now some scholars, right? For example, KC Weir, right? You would be knowing, constitutional expert, right? So and WG Andrews, both, as per both scholars, KC Weir and WG Andrews, they say that constitutionalism implies what? Division of power but not concentration of power. Division of power, what I told you, that nothing but division of power between, right, the three organs of state: legislature, executive, judiciary, right? And not concentration of power, right? Acceptance of plurality of interests in society, right? Plurality of interest in society, not the singularity interest, right? Means majority. For example, democracy is nothing but rule of majority, right? Or you can say rule of plurality, right? Again, no authoritative or dictatorial leadership, right? No authoritative means or dictatorial, simply both terms lies, okay, or implies that concentration of power in the hand of few people or one person, right? So it also checks authoritative or dictatorial leadership, right? Again, minimum constraints on individual freedoms. Minimum constraints means minimum restrictions on individual freedom, right? For example, fundamental rights are there, right? So fundamental rights are nothing but they checks, right, the actions of state, that no, state is not supposed to violate the freedom of or constrain the freedom of individuals, right? Next, what does constitutionalism incorporate, right? Simply I told you that it incorporates principle of limited government, right? Limited government means the constitution, right, limits the powers of government, right? For example, legislature, right, is supposed to make law, executive is supposed to implement laws, right? Judiciary is supposed to deliver justice and review the actions of legislature or executive, right? So it is nothing but principle of limited government, right? Government does not have unlimited power or arbitrary power, right? Again, principle of rule of law, I told you it is one of the most important, right, most important element, one of the, right, one of the, one of most important element of constitutionalism. I am writing in short, right? So these are two, or constitutionalism incorporates two things: first, principle of limited government; second, principle of rule of law, right? And to check arbitrariness and authoritarian discharge of power, right? Next, again, elements of constitutionalism. I told you that what are the elements, how these elements, if you found, right, if you find any of these elements or these elements in any democratic constitution, you can easily say constitutionalism exists there, right? So sovereignty, you would be knowing that, and we will discuss this term when we will discuss uh, preamble, right? So sovereignty, simply it is a legal term, and right? Legal term, it simple means what? Any state, right, is free, right, or sovereign, you can say sovereign or supreme to make law within or for its own internal affairs as well as international relations, right? That is the simple meaning of sovereignty, right? Every state is free, right? If a state is not free, then it is considered as what? A colony, you can say, right? Supremacy of the constitution and rule of law. Obviously, if there is constitutionalism, right, there should be supremacy of constitution and rule of law. So if there is, listen, if there is constitution or supremacy of constitution, it automatically establishes rule of law, because what is constitution? Nothing but the fundamental law of life, right? The whole state should be governed as per the provisions of constitution, and it establishes, or it can be established through rule of law, right? Political democracy, right? Political democracy means, it simple means that common people, right, a common man, right, or its citizens are able to participate in the electoral procedure, right? They can participate in the election, they can cast their vote freely, right? Again, representative and limited government. Obviously, I told you both are interrelated, right? Means representative and limited government. Representative means what? The government will include all sections of society, okay, irrespective of their caste, color, gender, place of birth, whatever, right? Separation of power, obviously, to check the to check concentration of power. This concept has been included in the constitutionalism, right? Separation of power, simply I told you that separation of powers between three organs of a state, that is legislature, executive and judicial, right? Civilian control of the military force, right? Civilian control of military force, simply it means that military would be controlled by the civilian government, right? Not the military will control the government, right? For example, take example of India, right? In India, military force is controlled by the civilians, means the our political leaders, they are called civilians. But take example of Pakistan, right? It is called, you can say, military state, right? Military state, why? Because generally, though there are political leaders, but generally in actual sense, right, the military has actual power, it controls the civilian or political leaders, right? Independent judiciary, obviously, right, where there is separation of power, right, and method of checks and balance, there should be independent judiciary, right? All these are elements of constitutionalism, right? Now you should check, or you should know whether constitutionalism exists in India or not, right? So yes, obviously. Why? Because first we have a written constitution. Listen, I would like to tell you here that it is not necessary, right, that constitutionalism exists only in those countries where there is written constitution. It can exist with written constitution, without written constitution, or there could be constitution but no constitutionalism. Giving three examples. For example, take example of India. We have written constitution and constitutionalism both. Take example of Britain. It has constitutionalism but no written constitution, right? Take example of China or any authoritarian state, right? Though they have written constitution, but hardly constitutionalism or hardly elements of constitutionalism are found there, right? So again I am repeating, constitutionalism can exist with written constitution, without written constitution, or in spite of that having a written constitution, constitutionalism may not exist in a state, right? Parliamentary democracy, obviously we have rule of law. Obviously, when we have written constitution, it also establishes rule of law, right? Fundamental rights, obviously, right? When states have authority, listen, when state, the constitution gives authority to state, right? To, sorry, constitution gives authority, right, to generally government to run the state. In other hand, right, it gives certain fundamental rights to its citizen, right, to check the arbitrariness of state, right? You can say fundamental rights acts as a shield, right, against the arbitrary actions of state, right? Separation of powers and checks and balance. Obviously, I told you, where there would be separation of power, there would be, or there should be, right, checks and balances. Otherwise, it will lead to concentration of power in the hands of one organ of state, right? Flexible constitution, right? Listen, flexible. Why flexible constitution? Because constitution should be, or could be, right, amended as per the changing demands of society and people, right? For example, Indian constitution is flexible as well as rigid, not completely flexible as Britain, not completely rigid or very rigid as US constitution, right? It is a blend of both, right? Some of its provision can be amended by simple majority, and some of its provisions can be amended by special majority, right? Yet no changes in basic structure, right? So no changes in basic structure, it simply means, like, here I would like to ask you one question. Okay, you can tell in which case, right, the Supreme Court propounded the doctrine of basic structure. Tell the name of case in the comment box, right? So flexible constitution, yet no change in basic structure. Basic structure means there are certain principles in the constitution that cannot be altered in any situation, right? For example, take the example of a house, right? Just consider the constitution as a house, right? So you can modify the house, the interior design or exterior design of house, but you cannot change the basic foundation, right, of the house. In the same manner, there are certain provisions of constitution, right, that cannot be altered in any situation. For example, take the example of federalism, right, secularism, fundamental rights itself. All these are nothing but basic structure of Indian constitution, right? A federal form of government. Obviously, federal form of government simply means what? There is separation of, division of power between union or central government and state governments. Both. Okay, here you should just be very clear that central government and state government both derive their power from the constitution, right? And the central government or union government acts just like a big brother, right? Both have to follow the provisions of constitution, right? Independent judiciary and judicial review. Obviously, where there would be independent judiciary, there would be judicial review. And if in any country, if the judiciary has power of judicial review, it automatically establishes judicial supremacy, right? And by using this tool, judicial supremacy, judiciary checks the arbitrary action of legislature or executive, right? So all these are elements in Indian constitution that reflects that constitutionalism exists in India, right? Now, importance of constitutionalism. Why constitutionalism is important, right? You can, the same points you can write in your means answer, right? Or even in interview, the same question may be asked: why constitutionalism is important, or what are the importance, right, of constitutionalism? So it says it is a set of norms. Norms means simple means rules, right? That prevents the state from abusing its powers. Right? I told you that it establishes rule of law, right? Not rule by law, right? Rule of law simply means the state will run as per the provisions of constitution. That is the fundamental law of land, right? Again, constitutionalism ensures that the people have liberty, right? Liberty and get justice, which is crucial for a democratic country such as India, right? For example, Article 21, right? It says right to life and personal liberty, right? Quite clear. There is slight difference between liberty and freedom. We will discuss this in when we will discuss fundamental right topic, right? So it ensures proper governance within the country or state, as it puts restriction on the overuse of powers by the state, thereby protecting the rights of democracy, right? So in simple terms, okay, it checks the overuse of power by the state, right, and protecting the rights of democracy. Here democracy means what? Simply, what is the simple meaning? Rule of people, right? So here rights of people are protected and actions of state are restricted, right? They don't have arbitrary or unlimited powers. They have limited powers, right? Again, it helps in the better development and welfare in developing countries, right? Obviously, when any state, right, for example, India is one of the best example of democracy, right? Because almost we have completed 75 years, right, after our independence, and it is running beautifully, right? So it, again, we have developed a lot, right? Though we are till date we are a developing country, but we have developed a lot. You can compare, easily compare, okay, what India was in 1947 and what it is in 2025, right? So it helps in better development and welfare in developing countries. India is also a developing country, right, as it denotes equal rights for all, right? Again, last point, it ensures that state is based on a specific rule and guidelines, right? Here actually, and not an, right? And is there, and guidelines, right? Which state every person has right to human dignity, right? Obviously, right? Simple. Now, next we will discuss what is constitution, right? So this was all about constitutionalism, right? Just have a look what we have discussed about constitutionalism, right? First we discussed what is constitutionalism, then, right, we have discussed what does it imply, right? Then we saw what does constitutionalism incorporate. Again, we saw elements of constitutionalism, right? Then we saw that does constitutionalism exist in India or not, right? Again, we saw importance of constitutionalism, and lastly, right, we will discuss or compare, right, between constitutionalism and constitution. Now see what is constitution, right? So here we will see what is constitution, right? Functions of constitution, purpose, right, and types, right? So first see what is constitution, right? So simple. As I told you that in simple terms or very basic terms, you should know that it is nothing but fundamental law of land, right? That helps a state to govern, right? And again, it provides certain rights, right, to its citizens, and also checks the arbitrary action of state. And here, state means the action of three organs of state, right? So, just see, constitution is fundamental law of land which embodies, right, which embodies the values, principles, and framework of the governance, right? Values, principles, and framework of the governance, right? It acts like a supreme law, okay, or you can also call it mother law, right? Because all the laws that is framed in any state or country, right, should be as per the provisions of constitution, right? It should not go beyond the provisions of constitution, right? Guiding states functioning, ensuring rights and duties of citizens, right? Obviously, you will be knowing that we have certain fundamental rights, certain fundamental duties too, right? Again, maintains the social order, right? When the constitution provides guidelines, right, for states functioning, it auto obviously what maintains the social order, right? And India, till date, India has, or India is functioning very beautifully, okay. The biggest reason is we have a very good and strong constitution, not only good but very strong constitution, right? Again, constitution is nothing but a power map, right? Power map, what does it mean? It simply means it defines that which organ of a state, right, will have which kind of powers or functions, right? For example, legislature, executive, and judiciary, right? Judicial. So it simply, that is the simple meaning of power bank, means it demarcates or explains which organ of a state have which kind of power, right? Next, power, I already told you, right? Here different branches of government, right? Means it defines the powers of different branches of government. Different branches of government is legislature, executive, judicial, right? Again, US Constitution, okay, is the oldest and shortest written constitution still in force. Okay, here focus the term, the sentence, right? US Constitution is oldest and shortest. Okay, do not have confusion, right? Because it says still in force. Okay, before this, okay, several constitutions were written even in Greece or different parts of world, but it says US Constitution is oldest and shortest written constitution that is still in force, right? Next, functions of constitution, right? I told you first function is what? It expresses the ideology, right? Expression of ideology, right? For example, when you will read or you must have read preamble, right? It is nothing but it reflects the ideology of our founding fathers, right? So it reflects ideology and philosophy of a nation state, right? Ideology and philosophy, for example, India is a sovereign socialist secular democratic republic. So it is nothing but it reflects the ideology as well as philosophy, right? Again, expression of basic law, right? As constitution is a basic law or fundamental law of land, right? So it expresses the basic law, right? And what it represents basic laws which can usually be modified or replaced through amendments, right? You would be knowing that Indian Constitution, take the example of Indian Constitution, it is called living document or organic document, right? Living or organic document means what? Which adapts or changes according to the time, right? For example, till date 106 amendments, right, have been made in the Constitution. So what is it? It is nothing but example of its changing nature, right? Its adaptation, right? Again, generally there are special laws too, which focuses upon rights of citizens. For example, right to equality. Obviously, this is very common. Again, organizational framework. Organizational framework means what? It provides framework. I told you, no, constitution is what? Power map, right? And power map means what? It clearly demarcates the power of organs of state, right? Means it provides for the government framework. It defines functions of legislature, legislative, executive, and judicial, right? Simple. Legislative, or you can say it makes law. Executive implements law. Judiciary delivers justice and review the actions of legislature or executive, right? Their interrelationship also, interrelationship, how it is ensured? Through method or by the method of checks and balance. Their relationship is ensured, right? We will discuss the checks and balance and separation of power in another topic, right? So simply you should know, where there is separation of power, they are also interrelated through method of checks and balance, right? And restrictions on their authority. Obviously, restriction on their authority means what? Their arbitrary power. Okay, if their actions are legitimate or as per the provisions of constitution, they are free to do, right? But they should not violate the provisions of constitution, right? Again, level of government. Level of government, it simply means it generally explains the level of different organs of government, right? For example, whether a government is federal or not. Federal, I told you that division of power between the federal or union government and the state or regional government, right? Confederation, unity is usually described by the constitution, right? For example, the preamble defines India is a sovereign socialist secular democratic republic. Not only democratic but democratic republic, right? It may also delineate the powers of national and provincial government. Obviously, what is the meaning of federalism. It clearly demarcates or explains the power of national, or you can say federal or central, whatever, right, and provincial governments, right. Again, it sets limitation on government. Obviously, it is one of the most important function of constitution, right, that it limits or sets limit on government, right. Government is not allowed to do anything in arbitrary manner, right. It always, or it is always supposed to follow the provisions of constitution, right. And if it acts arbitrarily, there is judiciary, independent judiciary, to check the power of government or actions of government, right. So it sets some limits on what a government can and cannot impose on its citizens, right. That's why we have due process of law, and again procedure established by law, right. These limits are fundamental in sense that a government may never trespass them, right. Simple. Now just see purpose of constitution, right. What are the purposes of constitution, right. Why should we have a constitution, or why a country should have constitution, right, especially in case of a democratic country, right. So it tells about the fundamental nature of state. Obviously I told you whether a country is federal, sovereign, socialist, secular or not, right, republic or not, democratic or not, right. So it tells about the fundamental nature of a state, right. Second, it lays out certain ideals, right. Secularism, right, socialism, all these are nothing but ideologies, right. So that form the basic kind of country as we, right, that we as citizen aspire to live in, right. For example, India is a secular country, it has idea of secularism, right. It serves as a set of rules and principles that all person in a country can agree upon as the basis of the way in which they want the country to be governed, right. So again, the all the person, right, all person in a country can agree upon, right. For example, when or the constitution, right, was framed by a constituent assembly, right, and it included different people from different sections of society, right, whether it is majority, minority, right, or SC/ST communities, or even women community, right. So it, and they were agreed upon all the provisions, right, though there were debates, right, debates, discussions, right, counter arguments, but they were agreed on certain provisions. That's why those provisions were included in the constitution, right. Now again it says, or another purpose is to prohibit the misuse of authority. I told you that it checks the power of or arbitrary actions of state, right. So to prohibit the misuse of authority of leaders and safeguard citizens rights. Obviously, for example, the government, right, whether central or state government, has imposed emergency, right. And what happens, you would be knowing that during emergency the fundamental rights of citizens are compromised, right. So they can knock the door of judiciary, right. And constitution checks the misuse of authority of leaders and safeguards the citizens rights, right. Again, it ensures, means constitution ensures that dominant group, right, dominant group means majority, right. For example, a community is in majority, it should not use its power against other less powerful people or groups, that is minority. Means here majority should not create atrocities, right, on minorities. It is also checked by constitution. That's why there are certain privileges given to minorities, right, by the constitution, right. Again, it protects us from ourselves. How? We, the people, have framed the constitution, right, but it protects us from ourselves. It simply means when certain elected leaders, right, go to the parliament, right, or state legislature, they can misuse the power, right, and they belong to us, right. They are not aliens, right, they belong to us, they are our people, That's why we have elected them, right? But what happens that after going or entering to the assembly, right, or gaining power, they try to or start or may start misuse of power. Okay, so to protect or the constitution protect us from ourselves, right? It means we might at times feel strongly about an issue that might go against our larger interest, right? For example, a leader of a particular committee, okay, is thinking or has been elected as the head of state, sorry, head of government, right? And what he has done or she has done, right, that just an example, right, that he has framed any law, right, that violates the rights of minorities, right, then or any particular committee, right, then what will happen that the constitution will safeguard the rights of minorities, right, and our larger interest, right, is protected, right, and the constitution helps us guard against this, right? So simply you should know that constitution checks the arbitrary action of either legislature, executive, right, generally legislature or executive, and in some cases even judiciary, right? It restricts the overuse or you can say misuse of power, right? Again, it also protects the minority groups, right, from the atrocities of majority groups, right? So all these are basic purpose of a constitution, right? Next, you can see the difference between constitutionalism and constitution, right? So even the same question can be asked in your interview, right? And in the means also you can write, use the same point, right? So constitutionalism, I told you that it is nothing but a concept, theory, or ideology, right? It cannot be seen in physical form. That's why it is compared with soul or spirit, right? Whereas constitution, right, generally is in visible form, right, a written document generally. Okay, most of the countries have written constitution, right? Some countries don't have written constitution, for example Britain, but in spite of that it has, there are some provisions, right, which are in written form, right? Constitution, a document that limits the power of state, obviously. Constitutionalism already told you, concept, theory, or ideology behind limiting the powers of a state. So first comes constitutionalism, and then comes constitution, right? And I told you that both can exist with each other and without each other, right? Also told you that it is soul or philosophy. It is a written document. In some cases or some countries, it is unwritten, right? Constitutionalism, it deals with limiting the powers of the state and protecting the individual right. When powers of the state, right, are restricted, obviously it or the rights of individuals are safeguarded. Simple, right? Constitution, it sets rules, standards to distribute benefits and burdens in society, right? Benefits, you get benefit, okay, because of fundamental rights. Burdens means your duties, right? Again, constitutionalism, it says application of the law in achieving those goals, right? Constitution, it sets rules and standards to distribute benefits and burdens in a society, right? I think the same point has been repeated here, right? Leave it, right? Same point has been repeated. Don't mind it, right? So the underlying basic or the underlying basis or principle of liberal democracy, right? If a country is liberal or a democracy is liberal, then obviously it has constitutionalism. Take example of Britain, India, US, right? All these are nothing but liberal democracy, right? So in any liberal country there is or constitutionalism exists, right? We have already discussed, right, whether it exists in India or not, right? Constitution not necessarily related to liberal democracy, right? Not, right? I told you that, for example, China is a what? China has a constitution, written constitution, but it is not a liberal country, right? Other authoritarian states, right, also have written constitution, but they are not liberal. But if in any country there is constitutionalism, it means that country is liberal country, liberal democracy. But if a country has constitution, it does not mean it is liberal democracy, right? Best example, China, Korea, right, North Korea, right? Again, constitutionalism is a living idea, right? Living idea means, I told you that it provides the base to constitution, right? And also it evolves over certain period of time, right? Constitution, it can be dead when rigid constitution fail to meet society's changing nature and aspiration. I told you Indian constitution is considered as organic or living document. But when a constitution is too rigid or very rigid, right, it is generally considered as a dead constitution. Right? Why dead constitution? Because it is unable, right? It is unable to change, right? Or it is unable to fulfill the changing demands of society and people, right? So this was the basic comparison between constitutionalism and constitution, right? Now, types of constitution, right? You would be knowing that though there are different types of constitution, but here we will discuss simple or main types of constitution, that is written and unwritten constitution, right? So how you will found, right, that a constitution is written or not, right? For example, just listen, right, that in the world, no country or no constitution is completely written or no constitution is completely unwritten. For example, Britain has unwritten constitution. In spite of that, some parts, okay, or some of its provisions, okay, certain acts, bills, right, or conventions are considered as constitution, right? India has a written constitution, but in spite of that, right, there are certain provisions, right, which have been included over the period of time, right, and certain provisions have been deleted also, right? Again, flexible and rigid. Flexible and rigid simply means if the constitution can be amended or the constitutional provisions can be amended by simple majority, it is considered as flexible. This is the example of Britain, right? If its provisions are or provisions cannot be amended easily by simple majority, right, then it is considered as rigid. Take the example of USA, right? But India, it is a balance between both flexible as well as rigid, right? Unitary or federal, right? India, America, right, have federal constitution. Unitary, Britain. Unitary constitution means the powers is concentrated in the hands of the union or central government, right? There is no division of power between the central government or federal government and regional or provincial government, right? Republic or monarchical, right? Obviously, monarchy means rule of king, queen, or monarch, whatever, right? Republic, always the head of state will be elected. For example, India is a republic, also democracy, but republic, because the head of a state, that is the president, is always elected, right? Presidential or parliamentary, obviously India or Britain has parliamentary form of government, right, or you can say parliamentary constitution. USA has presidential constitution. Lastly, political legal, right? So this was all about constitution and constitutionalism, right? Just see again, we are just have a recap, right? That we have discussed constitutionalism. What does it imply? What does constitutionalism incorporate? Elements of constitutionalism. Does constitutionalism exist in India? Importance of constitutionalism and constitutionalism and constitution. Under this topic, right, we have seen what is constitution, function of constitution, purpose of having a constitution, and types of constitution, right? So this was all about the basic concept of constitutionalism and constitution. We will meet in another lecture. Till then, thank you.